bishops. Right? We don't recognize the legality because we say it was justified. But even if you say, okay, the Vatican was right to condemn, that was lifted up. So the condemnation was not on the faithful, was not on the society, was just on the two bishops who did the consecration and the 4 bishops that were consecrated. So the 6 bishops. That's what it was, right? And it was never said that we were schismatic. That bishop said that. It's wrong. It wasn't even said like that. So eventually, the Rome, realizing the good work of the society, so in 2007, 2009, etc., recognized that the Mass, so lifted up the excommunications, recognized that the Mass had never been, the Latin Mass had never been forbidden, etc. And then Pope Francis, surprisingly, said also the society can hear confession all around the world. Right? So just to say that, technically speaking, we don't have the right papers. Technically, if you ask, okay, can you show me that you are part of a congregation of the Catholic Church? I cannot show you that because it was never restored. But in reality, in fact, the way the Church has dealt with us, especially with the question of confession, proves that in the eyes of the Church, in the eyes of the Pope, we are Catholic. And because for the Pope to give power to all society priests to hear confession all around the world is completely unique. I will tell you why. Why? Because normally, how does it work for a priest to hear confession? Well, let's say the diocese here in Jakarta, a priest is ordained by the bishop of the cardinal. So what does that mean? The priest makes him, the cardinal makes him a priest, and he gives him power to hear confession. So once the newly ordained priest has power from his bishop to hear confession within the diocese, he has automatically power to hear confession outside that diocese, unless a bishop somewhere in the world says, I don't want you here, I don't give you the faculties. Because you have two things about confession. It's a little bit, because it's like a judge, right? For those of you who studied law, right? You study law in order to become an attorney, a judge, etc., right? You get your diploma. That's one thing, right? Now, to exercise juridical power, you need to have jurisdiction, right? So you may have all the diplomas and the degrees, but maybe you're an attorney only in Jakarta or Bali, etc. If you start exercising that power in another place, it's illegal, right? So you have two different things. You've got the power and you've got the jurisdiction, the permission switch, right? So that's what you need for confession, right? So the Church never denied that we have the power of hearing confession, but they say, know what you're doing, you don't have the permission. So the Pope did something unique, because he told us, you can hear confession all around the world. Now, so much so that actually a few years ago, Father Stelin, maybe all the members would remember, was visiting a bishop in Asia, in India, and the bishop was angry and upset. What are you doing here? And then he told him, it says, well, the Pope has given us power to hear confession all around the world. The bishop could say nothing, because so it means this is extraordinary, because that bishop could tell any priest from here, say, I don't want to hear you to hear confession. That bishop cannot tell us that, because we receive the power directly from the Pope. So in that way, we have even more power than any priest in the world, right? This is extraordinary, right? But that shows something. This is a very clear sign that we are Catholic and that the Pope recognizes that we're Catholic. Because in normal times, a priest who has not, who has not the canonical faculties, let's say a priest who misbehaved, then say you cannot say Mass anymore, etc., etc., okay? Or even a schismatic priest who's a real priest. The Church automatically gives power to that priest to hear confession in case of emergency, someone is dying. I will give you that example that goes so far as a priest who left the priesthood, who got married, right? So of course he cannot exercise, be a priest anymore, right? But he still is a priest. Someone is dying by the road, he can give the absolution and give the sacraments. Because it's so important. So that this is extraordinary, right?
Right.
But the Pope didn't say in case of emergency. He says you can always hear confessions everywhere in the world. So the Pope didn't want to sign a paper saying you're Catholic, you have jurisdiction. But in a certain way, that's what he did implicitly. So we don't have, so for people who ask us, in a way we don't have the proper papers, but we receive all the faculties showing that we're Catholic priests. Right? And so when sometimes people tell me, oh well, you're not recognized by Bishop so-and-so, I said, yeah, but I'm recognized by the Pope. So, and I'm not lying, it is true, right? So it's a strange situation, it's an abnormal situation, but it's not your fault or my fault, right? It's just the way it is. So we're just continuing, we maintain the faith, and we're doing whatever we can to spread the Catholic faith. Just to say that there is no doubt that we are Catholic, that we're doing the right thing. Now about attending Mass or receiving communion. Okay, so tell me whether I'm answering your question, but we are not bound to. We are bound to receive communion once a year, right? At least that's the precept of the Church. As for the Mass, normally we bound to attend Mass every Sunday and the holidays or obligations. So these are two different things. In Novus Ordo, they sort of mix that together. Now, of course, people are advised to receive communion as often as possible. If possible, every time you attend Mass. But you may not be in the good conditions. Maybe you're in a state of mortal sin. Maybe you think that you're in a state of mortal sin. You are not sure. Maybe you just ate before because you forgot or something. Okay? So to attend Mass and to receive communion are two different things. Right? So unlike the Novus Ordo, because the Novus Ordo is a meal, it's a banquet. Say, hey, come over, have a feast. I mean, just everybody comes. So they don't talk about confession. Often you don't have the possibility of going to confession. When you want to have confession, the priest says, why are you bothering me for that? Right? So there's an important distinction between attending Mass and receiving Holy Communion. Priests are obliged to receive communion every time they say Mass, not the faithful. Right? The priest cannot say Mass and say, I don't receive communion. The priest has to receive communion when he receives the Mass, because he's the one offering the sacrifice that he has to. The faithful are invited to receive communion if they can, if they're in the right dispositions. Am I answering the question? Maybe one or two questions? Yes?
About some homosexual members, like Vatican monks, some Vatican monks. Do you think about homosexuality is originated from idolatry?
Coming from idolatry?
Idolatry, because I ever read on Daniel Dolan, Bishop Daniel Dolan commentaries, it following all homosexuals are come from idolatry in Sodom.
I don't know. I mean, no, it's pagan practice. I mean, it's pagan and very, so like for instance, I'm sorry to enter it, I don't mean to enter too many details, but okay. So idolatry, Sodom and Gomorrah, that's the Old Testament, pagan practices, and the pagans, like the Greeks, were famous for that. Sorry, so that was pagan rites, yes, etc. So the church really was able to kick that out, right? But then bad practice have come again. So, I mean, is it connected to? I don't think it's connected to idolatry. I think it's connected to pagan practices. Well, when there's no more religion, no respect of God, and then people say, I do whatever I want with my body, right? I'm a woman, I can commit an abortion because I do whatever I want with my body. Well, then you do whatever you want with your body. Then you can any type of lifestyle, right? So I don't think it's really connected to idolatry. I think it's paganism, and that is coming back. The last question is.
One last question, Father. It's about the Fraternity of Society St. Peter, FSSP. What is equal with FSPX?
Okay, let me try to be short. So in 1988, when Archbishop Lefebvre decided to make the consecration of the bishops, some priests and seminarians left and said, no, 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 we don't accept that, because it's against the will of the Pope. So, the thing is, the sad thing, the sad thing is that those who left in 1988, they said we leave just because of that. We agree with Archbishop Lefebvre until 1988, and then after, we don't accept now what he's doing. The reality in 2022, not all, okay, but because you have different, you don't have one teaching in the Fraternity of St. Peter, you've got different teachings. But you've got a good number of priests and seminarians who don't accept what Archbishop Lefebvre accepted till 1988. They have accepted the council, etc., right? They say the Trinity Mass, God bless them, right? They've been persecuted for that, right? And I know several priests of the Fraternity of St. Peter. I even know the Superior General of the Fraternity of St. Peter quite well. So you don't have one thought. You have some that are very close to us, very friendly to us, to the Society of St. Pius X, and some are not. Some are saying they're schismatic, etc. Some accept the new things of Vatican II. They speak about St. Paul VI, St. John Paul II, and all these things, right? Some not. So they're divided. And the problem is that there are many things they cannot say publicly. I will give you an example to the credit of that priest of the Fraternity, just to tell you that I'm fair, right? I know a priest of the Fraternity, I will not tell you where, but anyway, friendly to us. Not just friendly, but I think very close to us doctrinally. He knows that there are many problems with Vatican II, right? So why is it in the Fraternity of St. Peter? Well, these are historical reasons he entered there, etc. He asked one of our priests to go and preach to his faithful about Vatican II. So our priest did that, right? So that shows that that priest is very close to us. But he got in trouble with the bishop. So first, many priests of the Fraternity would not do that. So some agree with us, but even if they agree with us, there are many things they cannot say. So concretely, you know, I mean, you may be in a place, in a situation where there's only priests of the Fraternity, so that will depend. But I say so. So I'm not judging them, right? I mean, I'm sure that many are trying their very best, right? And they've been persecuted, right? But you know, in a certain way, they compromised, and they are at the mercy of bishops, who can be sympathetic or more or less with them, or not. Say, you do this, otherwise no, you have to concelebrate on the Holy Thursday. If you don't, then I suppress you. You can say Mass, okay, no catechism, no baptism. You can say Mass, but it has to be in a church, and just before there must be the Novus Ordo. So the whole context is very different. So they are trapped, right? So again, I'm not judging them. There are certainly good priests, there are certainly many good faithful. They certainly have done, many people in fact have learned about the Trinity Mass thanks to these priests, right? But if you ask me as a whole, I cannot recommend that congregation are going there, because it's ambiguous, because there are many things they cannot say, many things they cannot preach. We have full freedom about, we say, you go to the SSPX, you have the whole package, right? The Mass, the doctrine, the sacraments, everything, 100% sure, right? You don't have 90% or 80% with a, you know, so that's really the difference between the SSPX and other groups that are also promoting the Latin Mass. Right. Very last question. Is it Eastern Catholic or Eastern Orthodox? Okay, you know it's very different, right? Okay, it's a good question. It's a good question. So, as you know, the Eastern Catholics are Catholics. right? Precisely, they're not orthodox. Okay. The problem. So, I myself, when I was a child, for a while attended the Ukrainian Mass because there was no Latin Mass. Okay. But I cannot give you a straight answer either, right? The reason is it depends. It depends for several reasons. First of all, some of these Eastern Catholics have been too much under the influence of Vatican II for the liturgy, and they've changed the rites, R-I-T-E, they've changed the ritual of the Mass, and instead of doing it completely traditional in Byzantine, in Ukrainian, etc., in Russian or in Maronite, one of these Eastern languages, they have become quando, sordo, and introduced maybe Bahasa, maybe facing the faithful. You have that in India. In southeast India, in Kerala, you've got Syro-Malabar, etc. Often they introduce novelties, right? So it depends. Sometimes you've got novelties in the rite of the Mass and also in the teaching. I remember again, when I was a teenager, so there was, we were sometimes going to a Mass in the Ukrainian, or to be more explicitly Slavonic, so let's say it's Ukrainian, right? The priest before was very conservative. The priest after started changing it, and he was very much Novosordo. He was not wearing his cassock. He was even celebrating with other people, etc. So then it's it's better than Novosordo because it's still, but so you really have to see. Right? So sometimes it's fine because it's a good alternative when you when you don't have a Latin Mass. Sometimes not. So it's really case by case. Right? Thank you very much. Do you know the bridge naturally? You can sing it.
Capiamus gaudiavit, perium dem Christum Dominum nostrum. Amen.
My blessing. Benedictio Dei Omnipotentis, Patris, Filii et Spiritus Sancti, descendat super vos et maniat semper. Amen.